Well, joining me now to discuss how the Kremlin will react to NATO's biggest military exercise since the Cold War era is Dmitry Babach. He's a political analyst for Sputnik International and joins me from Moscow. Thanks a lot for joining us, Dmitry. So you have more than 30,000 servicemen from 24 nations over 10 days in Poland. They're doing it because they feel threatened. From the Russian perspective, do you feel threatened by their actions in Poland right now?
Well, I am threatened by NATO's irrationality and stupidity because NATO is sort of convincing itself that Russia can attack the Baltic countries, Latvia or Estonia. From here, from Moscow, we know it for sure that we are not going to attack these countries. We don't need them anymore. But the problem is that the NATO only listens to itself. It doesn't listen to any counter arguments from the Russian side.
So why are the Estonians and the Lithuanians?
I will explain.
Okay.
I will explain.
Why do they want NATO help? Why do they want NATO help?
Because I can tell you, for example, about Poland, because I speak Polish, because Poland has a crude nationalist, authoritarian, anti-Russian regime, which in order to sort of make itself more popular with the population, uses anti-Russian rhetoric. So formally, Anakonda is a Polish exercise, but look at this Polish exercise. There are 14,000 American troops participating and 12,000 Polish troops. So it's quite clear which country and which government is now ruling Poland. As for the accusations from NATO that Russia changed internationally recognized borders in Crimea, well, before that, NATO countries changed the elected government in Kiev. They assisted the anti-constitutional violent coup in Kiev, replacing the government of a 46 million strong nation.
And the Ukrainians and the West see that as a revolution. I just want to go back to Poland for a second because you called it an authoritarian government. The last time I checked, it was a democracy. It's also a sovereign state. There was a Pew poll in January 2015. They polled people in Poland. 70% of them said they view Russia as a major military threat. So this is not NATO, this is not the West, these are the Polish people, 70% of them, overwhelmingly saying Russia's a major military threat. That's why they want this help. It's not because it's being imposed on them, Dmitry.
Well, I watch the Polish television every day. I read Polish newspapers every day. It's surprising me that it's not 99% because Poles are told every day horrendous lies about Russia. You know, the Polish media has been completely anti-Russian. Before this government came to power, it was very anti-Russian under the so-called liberals. You know, the Liberal Party in Poland is called the Civic Platform, but by the European standards, it's also a very nationalist right-wing party. So, in fact, Poles have been bombarded by anti-Russian propaganda. But still, I meet a lot of Polish people, especially from the older generations, who remember that it was Russia who saved Poland from complete extermination under the Nazi rule. And these people have a very different opinion about Russia.
Fair enough, and you can argue that Russia saved all of Western civilization from Nazi rule. We can go into history there. Now, I want to go back to Ukraine. I know we're going to disagree here because you say the Ukrainians call it a revolution, but you call it a coup. Fine. However, internationally, the entire world sees Crimea as being annexed by Russia. So let's try and look at it from everybody else's perspective to the west of Russia's borders. You have Crimea being annexed. You have Russia funding and supporting separatists in the east of Ukraine. You had Russian jets buzz over a US ship very recently in April in the Baltic Sea. With all of this in mind, you would understand why they feel Russia is getting expansionist. Russia wants to become the old Soviet Union again, won't you?
Well, I can give you facts. So let's proceed from the very beginning.
Okay, so where did I get my facts from?
What happened in Ukraine a revolution? Well, I will tell you where you got them wrong. First, you say that Ukrainians call what happened in Kiev in 2014 a revolution. There is no such term as a revolution in legal language. There is election and there is an illegal coup, a violent change of the government. The head of the Stratfor Foundation in the United States, George Friedman, called what happened in Ukraine the most obvious, the longest coup in human history. You remember how for 5 months these people in the center of Kiev, they were throwing Molotov cocktails, they killed 13 policemen. In the United States, if you kill 1 policeman, you get arrested and your demonstration is over.
And the Ukrainian government that was Russian allied had killed, and the Ukrainian government that was Russian allied had killed protesters as well. Again, we're going to disagree.
That was never
half
proven.
the country calls it a revolution, the other
because
calls it a coup. Tell me where else my facts were wrong in what I just told you. After that,
okay, I will continue. On Crimea, you know, of course, Crimea, which has a Russian population and which had its autonomy threatened by the new government, it could not, it did not want to live under the new regime in Ukraine. It agreed to live under mildly nationalist regime of Leonid Kuchma, but it was not ready to live under the people like Poroshenko and Tymoshenko, who openly said that Crimea would lose its autonomy. So the people of Crimea decided to join Russia again.
But Russia,
you know
first had to annex it before
Crimea
it had
was a
to
part of
annex it
Russia.
before they had an election. You still had to come in with the tanks to take it before they had the election.
No. First Crimea had a referendum. First Crimea rebelled against the new authorities in Kiev. And in Donbass, the people whom you call pro-Russian separatists, they held a referendum in the spring of 2014 at which the majority of people voted for federalization of Ukraine. I don't understand what is so illegal about making a country a federation.
Okay, so why doesn't the United Nations? Why doesn't the United Nations accept it?
I can't finish.
Okay,
I let you finish.
So let
me finish.
So
okay?
let me add a question to it then.
You keep interrupting me, and then you ask me what did you get wrong.
Dimitri,
I will tell you what you get wrong.
Dmitry, why doesn't the United Nations then recognize Crimea as an independent, as a part of Russia? And why doesn't it recognize the east of Ukraine as independent if what you're saying is right?
Because the UN has been made very weak and invalidated by a lot of Western action since 1991. The Western attack against Yugoslavia in 1999 was against the UN rules. The Western invasion of Iraq in 2003 was against the UN rules. So if someone is to blame for the fact that the United Nations is now irrelevant, it is not Russia, it is the United States, the United Kingdom, and a few other countries in the West.
Okay, final question for you, Dmitry. Does NATO have a right to exist?
I think the NATO certainly has a right to exist like any alliance, but the way it operates right now is simply very dangerous. When you say that the Russian planes buzz over American warships in the Baltic, please look where the United States is and look where Russia is.
But they did buzz over them.
These US ships were... They buzzed over it because these ships were in 10 minutes flight from St. Petersburg, which is the second capital of Russia. And they were thousands of miles, tens of thousands of miles away from the United States. When the Soviet ships were nearing Cuba in 1962, the American warplanes buzzed over them. And I think it was fair because these ships were not at home. Americans should not be at home in 2 minutes away from St. Petersburg. They will be buzzed in future if they try to come close to our cities.
Dmitry Babach, it's been great getting your perspective.
They had a chance to be friends, but they didn't want to.
Okay, that's very ominous then. Dmitry, thank you very much.